listening to Not So Live from Asteroid G. I'm Mike Finkelstein. With me, as always, is...
The horror buddy, the other Mike. How you doing?
You are the horror buddy at this point.
I am. It's fun, though. I like talking about this stuff.
So this week, we are going to be discussing Friday the 13th, the movie series, because horror. Which is a movie series that you were pointing out when we were looking at the list of them, has not seen a real update in quite some time, although... we will touch upon this. I'm pretty sure they're working on a TV series prequel called Camp Crystal Lake or something.
I believe I've seen something about that, yes.
So I don't know if it has a channel attached to it yet, but that's supposedly what's going on now that the rights to the franchise have been worked out. Because that's the weird thing with this. The franchise is caught between the writer of the original movie, Miller, and Cunningham, the director.
Miller, yeah.
And... like, them who did it, and then some of the people that were involved later. And so, like, when the rights were sold from Paramount to New Line, it caused a big snafu, and now no one's really sure who owns anything, but some of the rights, at least, were worked out for Camp Crystal Lake to happen. It's strange. Because TV rights are, of course, their own stupid thing in Hollywood.
Yeah, I mean, you got to have rights to everything, and inside outs and upside downs and loopholes. It's, a lot for us fans to endure just to get the product into our faces.
It's dumb. Friday the 13th started off as a slasher movie inspired by the slasher movies that had come out just a little while beforehand. Basically, you're looking at Black Christmas and Halloween, which we haven't touched upon Black Christmas, although at some point we can go do those three movies if you still want. They're only the first one's really any good.
Right.
Yeah, but because we had Christmas and then we had Halloween, and then soon after, like, everyone else was like, oh, holiday horror movies seem to work out well. So we got, like, My Bloody Valentine and Prom Night and a whole bunch of other shit. Not all of them are exactly holidays, but always April Fool's Day, New Year's Evil. I think I've watched and reviewed most of these, actually. And then Friday the 13th, which is arguably the most successful of any of the holiday slasher flicks to come out other than the Halloween series.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing. Like, Friday the 13th is synonymous with, like, horror and, like, evil and all that kind of stuff. And, like, you got to really credit this franchise, I think, for kind of doing that and making that the way things are. A lot of people look at Friday the 13th as a bad omen, and it probably just comes from this film franchise. It's pretty amazing.
It's interesting just to see this one because, Halloween and Friday the 13th, and then everything else that you would think maybe would start a franchise didn't really. I mean, Black Christmas wasn't primed for it, but if My Bloody Valentine had been more successful, they would have found a way to do more minor pick slasher flicks out of that, Like,
right.
Yeah, I mean, Prom Night managed to rate, like, 5 movies in the franchise, and no one even liked any of them.
I don't think I watch a lot of really bad horror movies and a lot of really good horror movies. I don't think I've seen much more than the first one of those. So.
I'm pretty sure you can't even get. I think it's the third one. Is Moratorium, and you just can't find it anywhere. So yeah, and that happens with a lot of horror franchises where their rights get snatched up for individual movies by different people, and then they just end up in archives and never to be seen again.
Yeah, someone's basement in a box somewhere.
Right, yeah. They have the reels, and those reels are dying, and oh well, too bad Prom Night 3. I guess no one gets to see you. That really probably wasn't much of a loss. But no, like, I like, in theory, I like the Friday the 13th series. I think that its growth and its evolution is interesting. More interesting in what they had planned than what I think ends up on the screen. But it is certainly interesting to see one of the few instances in the first movie, anyway, of a female killer.
Yeah, little known, maybe a well-known fact for most people that, that the people are fans of the franchise. But the killer in the original movie, not even Jason, it is his mother, taking revenge for her son being, drowning by a neglectful group of camp counselors. Hence the bloody rampage that the mother takes through the counselors at Camp Crystal Lake. So very interesting. And Jason doesn't become the main antagonist of the franchise until part 2.
And he doesn't even get his iconic mask until the third film.
Correct. Yeah, I think he's just wearing like a satchel or something on his face the first time, and
yeah,
the second
just a sack, just sackcloth. Yeah. And of course, it's the fact that iconic mask came in the third movie when the original creators are no longer involved that causes much of this problem. Because how can you use the iconic character when you didn't make the iconic character?
Yeah, I mean, the iconic character we know today is not the same one from the original couple films, but I
Yep.
mean, I think it's for the better in the long. I find Jason as one of the more, just his sheer violence in the movies and the way he kills people is like no other. You get a lot of really good deaths from Michael Myers and some superhuman strength and all that, but Jason, like, he'll straight fold you in half like a lawn chair. I mean, you've seen him kill some people in some really vicious ways, which I'm a big fan of, and I'm here for it.
The metaphysical Jason, definitely the one who suddenly has superpowers after Jason Lives Part Six. Because you're not wrong, the
Hmm.
Jason we have in the later films is really not the same Jason from the first couple. Like Pamela Voorhees dies at the end of the first one. Spoilers, I know. And then Jason supposedly dies at the end of the second one, and then the second one does a tag ending where they basically do the tag ending of the first one, but it's
Right.
Pamela come back from the dead to kill the next person, which doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and it's only with like the hockey mask and then the slowly like, oh well, Jason's still alive, that
Mhm.
that they try to stretch it out. And even then, like the inappropriately named The Final Chapter, the fourth movie in a 11, 12 movie franchise at this point, uh they wanted Jason to die. Like the
Mhm.
implication for the fifth movie was that it's not even Jason, something that they decided to walk back afterwards. But I think it
Right.
would have been much more interesting if like Jason as an identity was more like the Scream Killer, where after a certain point, whoever's doing it dies, and the next person that's inspired by it picks up the slack and goes. You know?
Yeah, yeah, kinda takes up the mantle, and we'll do
Mhm.
the Scream franchise. That was our original plan today, but, me not knowing there was a brand new Scream that came out a couple months ago. I saw the most recent last year, which I was a huge fan of. So I got some homework to do before the
You
next
do,
time we get together in a few
you
weeks,
do.
and I'm gonna do that. But, yeah, I mean, like, takes up the mantle of the previous killer and kind of, evolves and makes things better and, more interesting plot wise for the next movie is kind of the theme of Scream. And the killer can be anybody. This one, you know who the killer is, and you're done when you see him. It's pretty
Yeah,
simple.
yeah. When Jason shows up, it's Jason in every movie except for like the first and the fifth, and I think it
Hmm.
might even the fifth. It might be Jason. That one was such a confused movie. It was.
Yeah.
They really didn't know what they wanted to do. They wanted some new killer that they were introducing to be the bad guy, but then they kind of walked that back in the sixth movie, and then just completely ignored it for the New Blood, where they had him fight essentially Carrie.
Yeah, it's very strange. And Jason Lives Part 6, and is where they're like, "Oh, we made a mistake. He's back. Okay, here we go."
A bolt of lightning resurrects him. He'll be fine.
Yeah, yeah, it's this ever growing presence of just demonicness that Jason is, and
Mhm.
the connection to the underworld, the very strong ties of hell into the movies and all that. Pretty
Mhm.
cool.
So yeah, it's. I think it's interesting if we look at it in the context of the chunks of the series, because
Hmm.
there's a lot of movies, and I'll be honest with you, they kind of run together for me. Oh look, guy with machete is back, but like
Right.
you can tell that the franchise is feeling itself out for the first four films, because we go from Pamela to Jason with the hockey mask, and then Jason dies, and the
Mhm.
kid that kills him at the end of number four was supposed to be the killer moving forward, except they decided not to commit to that.
Yeah, and I'm
Yep.
pretty sure that it was, Crispin Glover was in the movie in the fourth one. Great actor from
He
Back
is
to the Future
Jimmy.
fame. Yeah,
Yeah.
Back to the Future fame and such. And I think a young Corey Feldman with the shaved head is in the
Yep.
movie as well.
Yep.
Kind of takes
Yeah.
on that violent appearance of Jason at the end of the movie, killing him and all that.
Uh-huh. He's a kid who's really into horror movies and like horror masks and so forth. And
Hmm.
so he like somehow like takes on Jason's like murderous rage by the end of the film, which is just weird. But I mean,
Yeah.
it's Corey Feldman. He already always looks like he has a slightly murderous rage anyway.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and that's Tommy Jarvis, who would then go on to feature in the next two films of the series. So it's kind of like you get an opening trilogy. That's where the movie's kind of, or the franchise is kind of finding its mythology. And then
Right,
you had a
right.
second trilogy that was supposed to transition us to a new killer, except like Tommy Jarvis is set up as the killer at the end of the fourth, leads into the fifth where he's supposed to be the killer and then
Mhm.
isn't. And
Right.
then the sixth movie completely rewrites his character and makes him into a hero, which makes no sense.
Yeah, it's a strange
Yeah.
choice and whatnot, but you
Yeah.
you can see it, like you said, the first movie kind of stands alone as
Mhm.
what it is, with Pamela being the killer, and then the second three, two, three, and four, kind of their own little trilogy, and then four, five, and six do the same thing, its own little trilogy, kind of, or five, six, and seven, excuse me, running into its own little mini meta trilogy right there, and then things get really weird with Jason Takes Manhattan and whatnot, but I mean,
That's
it's
where it
fine.
loses its way. Yeah.
It's fine. He's Jason, like a lot of his movies are, backwater country camp
Mhm.
kind of, killing scenes and
Mhm.
scenarios. So when he goes to the big city, like, think let loose this giant killer in this huge city, there's going to be this enormous body count. It was just like kind of
It's
it
kind
was
of
an
let
okay
down.
movie. Yeah,
Yeah, it
it's
was
kind
kind
of
of
an
let
okay
down.
movie, but I
He
expected
kills a
more.
lot of people on the cruise ship and then doesn't
Right.
really kill much of anyone once he gets to the city. You're like, really? Really? He's still
Yeah.
focused on these stupid teens that have run off. He cares. Jason doesn't
Yeah.
care. Jason just sees bodies and kills them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
dragging bodies and
Yeah.
whatnot, and
Yeah.
bringing home to his mother's severed head on the altar. That's what he
Right.
does.
Yeah, that's what you do. I mean, you
Mhm.
got to bring her a present. You were out. I mean, it's done. Yeah.
Mommy dearest, yeah.
Yeah. Right. No, it's just how that's what you do. It's Mother's
Yeah.
Day. You bring a head. That's how that works. No, like so I think there are interesting parts of the later films because
Mhm,
I liked the idea of transitioning away from Jason. Not that it did it, and I
mhm.
think that this movie could have done or this franchise could have done it much more smoothly than what Halloween tried to do, which we talked about in the last horror podcast, where
Right,
they're like,
right.
okay, Michael's dead. Let's do a killer Halloween mask movie instead, which just I mean. I appreciate the gusto with which they attacked that story. That was
Mhm.
not the right story. But
Standalone, it's an okay
it's an
film.
okay film. Yeah.
But you try to incorporate that into a franchise that is synonymous with a single villain, and it
Yeah.
it, it just doesn't really work for me.
No, it doesn't work. But it's interesting to think that, all it takes to make a new killer in this franchise is give them a hockey mask. And had they committed to Tommy Jarvis being the bad guy,
Hmm.
a character played by three different actors across three films, let's note,
Right,
um,
right.
I think that would have been an interesting touch. They didn't commit to it. They decided to make Jason a supernatural killer, and he gets resurrected by a lightning bolt in the sixth one, fights a psychic girl in the seventh one, and then
Mhm.
gets killed by sewer waste in the eighth one. I'm kind of confused by that whole ending.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't know.
I
Strange,
don't-
strange choices abound in that movie.
Jason Takes Manhattan is just bad. Let's just put it
Yeah,
that way. But I
yeah.
actually, for what it is, the new when New Line Cinema takes over and they started with Jason Goes to Hell, I
Hmm.
actually didn't hate that movie. Now you note everything that New Line Cinema has done, which is three films. They don't use the Friday the 13th thing, and I'm pretty sure that's because they weren't allowed to. Their movies
Correct.
have Jason in the title. But
Hmm.
Jason Goes to Hell, as weird as it is, it's gorier, it's slimier, it adds a
Hmm.
lot of mythology that isn't in the franchise and doesn't make a lot of sense in the context of the franchise.
Hmm.
But as a single Jason movie all on its own, I kind of liked it.
It's pretty good. Like,
Yeah.
it touches on some interesting things, some new meta in there, like you were saying, and you bring back Jason in,
An
kind of
interesting
bring
way.
him into the 90s
Yeah.
in a way, and it's
Yeah.
really makes him fresh. It's 4 year gap in between Takes Manhattan and the Final Friday.
The
So
first time the film's franchise had ever had a gap that big because most of them were
yeah,
yearly releases or within a year and a half. Yeah.
yeah, they were kind of released about a year apart all the time throughout the
Hmm.
80s. There was 8 of them in the
It was
80s
a
alone.
fixture. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
kind of
summer's
was a
around.
thing.
Let's go see Jason kill some kids.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So definitely a neat little some touches in there, and I like the movie too. I thought it was really good. I saw it as a younger kid, probably too young to have seen it when I did, but I
Probably.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, but it's fine. It was a good movie, and it really kind of introduced. That was really my introduction to Jason. Was this
Hmm.
movie
Yeah.
in '93? That was when I learned who Jason was. I knew Jason Takes Manhattan when I was younger. I was like
Yeah.
7 when that movie came out, so I remember seeing the theater posters and whatnot, but I couldn't see it at 7 years
Mhm.
old. But at 11, with having access to HBO, I mean,
Hell
the
yeah.
parent. I mean, let's go. Let's watch a
Yeah.
Jason. Let's watch a horror movie on a Saturday night at 1 in the morning or something. And
And
it was good.
I think as an introduction to the Jason franchise, and this actually explains why you enjoy him so much, this is a good film for it. It's got story, it's got a cool mythology. It actually
Mhm.
does the thing that we were talking about earlier. Jason actually transitions from one body to another and finds a
Yeah.
way to continue himself in an interesting way. Like,
Mhm.
I like this one much more for what it tries to do and the big swings it takes than some of the other dumb movies like Jason fighting a psychic girl or
Right.
Lightning Bolt Jason. Yeah.
I just remember still like the coroner picking up the heart in this movie and eating it, and just
Yeah,
him becoming
so
Jason. I'm like,
grotesque.
oh god, what is this? Oh my god, this is so gross, and
Yeah.
oh, it's so good, and it's a good movie. It's a lot of there's gore, there's good plot. It's a good introduction, like you said, to the Friday the 13th franchise. If
Mhm.
this is your first one, and for me, it was.
When we actually finally do a food podcast at some point, we should make Jason mask burgers like are in this movie.
Oh heck
That'd be
yeah,
great.
man,
Yeah, that'd be
that'd be
so
awesome.
good.
um,
So,
so after that,
yeah,
1993, the
we
final
get the worst one
Friday.
though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I
Oh,
had high hopes for this one in a
oh
way.
God.
9 years gap there in between this one,
It's so
93 to
terrible.
2002,
Yeah.
and I remember liking it when I saw it because it was Jason again, and I hadn't seen a new Jason movie in many years, and I was a fan of it. But it was like you said, it was just really bad. There
So
was some
terrible.
good kills, some decent gore. Um, this was some weird frame of Hollywood where a lot of things were kind of going to like space or whatever.
Hmm.
So like, hey,
Hmm.
let's bring Jason into space. It's set like in a futuristic Earth where they go back to get his remains or whatever to
Yeah.
kind of just figure out what's going on and what this killer was all about. It's like a bunch of kids and a teacher and
It was
students.
so weird.
It was a
So weird.
weird plot,
Yeah.
but the deaths were kind of cool. There was
The
some good
deaths were.
stuff.
Yeah, there was a lab tech who gets like frozen, cryogenically frozen, and then shattered. I liked that one. So
Yeah.
a few decent impalings. Like
Hmm.
if you just saw clips of the kills on YouTube, you'd probably think it was a decent low budget movie. But
Hmm.
you did raise a point that I want to like sidestep to for a second. The '90s and the early 2000s were a strange time for horror franchises because
Yeah.
it's like every one of the big franchises when they ran out of ideas had to go to the ghetto and they
Hmm.
had to go to space.
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
like Friday the 13th did it with Takes Manhattan and Jason X. That's what it's called.
Hmm.
Not Jason 10. It is. They literally called it Jason X
Isn't
when you
that?
heard it
Yeah.
pronounced. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, you had Leprechaun, which went to space, and then
Yes.
2 times in the ghetto, no less.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Leprechaun in the Hood.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like the Hellraiser franchise started it because they did
Hmm.
Hell on Earth, which was set in New York, not London, like the previous two or whatever
Right. Right.
English suburb they were in. And
Hmm.
then the fourth one, Bloodline, took you to space. Like they started this whole stupid thing, and then of course the Muppets also did it, which is just weird in its own
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. You want to talk about some scary horror right there? The
The
Muppets.
Muppets.
My
Oh
God.
heck yeah.
It was like it was a formula theme that movies did. You,
Yeah.
you went here, you went there, and if you didn't get a space movie, and you were kind of being left behind.
And
And
that I mean the Nightmare on Elm Street movies never did that. They just sucked in their own way. But
yeah,
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 yeah. But no, like Jason X is pure potential of what they could have done, and I think part of the problem is they just didn't have the budget to pull off something like that. I mean, the movie was made on 14 million, and there's just
yeah.
no way you can do a space station set film for 14 million and not have it look
Yeah.
cheap. The best,
I'm pretty sure there was Christmas lights in the movies and places. Like
I'm
it's,
sure
it
it's really bad.
was,
It's it's
yeah,
it's a lot of smoke machines and a lot of bare lighting to try and make it look like
yeah,
like an aliens set, but without like the production value. The
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
the best part of that movie is when he ends up on the holodeck and kills a couple of campers in their sleeping bags, and he's just
Yes.
they're like saying stuff while he's smacking them against the tree.
A
It's
tree.
so dumb, and that was
Oh,
like the one time where I actually paid attention in that film because it was the
yeah,
only time it showed creativity.
yeah. It
So,
was good, and it's like it just shows Jason has a sense of humor as
yep,
well,
yep, yep.
which is funny.
By comparison, Jason or Freddy versus Jason is at least watchable, but I kind of feel like a lesser entry for both franchises.
I'm a fan of this movie,
Okay.
because like we briefly touched on this a while back,
Uh
talking
huh.
about just like sheer body count, and this right
Sure.
here, this movie just the body count is not even close, Jason to Freddy, and yes, to your point, there is the beginning of the movie, which can be argued that Freddy's pulling the strings, and a lot of those kills should be credited to him. Fair,
and
even
I
though at the same time, it's still probably 3-1 Jason throughout the movie,
and I really
even with
think like
those.
the first act of the film is probably where it's at its best because it's its
Yeah,
most creative. It has Jason doing kills to help Freddy, even though Jason doesn't want to. Um,
Right, right.
and so you've got this cool idea about how to merge the two franchises together and use one to resurrect the other and do so forth.
Mhm.
And I like that. And there's
Yeah,
even some creepy scenes where like Jason knocks a girl out and then Freddy invades her dreams, and you're getting this cool
yeah,
like back and forth between the two, and I love that. The problem is when they start separating the two characters out, and it's not the battle between them. The battle between them is fine. Um,
right.
but it's when Freddy goes back to being Freddy, and it's the
Mhm.
Freddy of the later films where he's more comedic and not as scary. And
Yeah,
it's on full display here, and it feels so totally different from the first half of the film.
yeah. Freddy
Mhm.
is kind of a really cerebral kind of
Yeah.
killer in movies. He comes at you in your dreams. He lives off your fear. It's how he has power and whatnot. But he definitely has a lot of one-liners and a lot of shtick that
Hmm.
goes into like this character and the evolution of this character in the film franchise that he had. And Robert Englund does a great job playing Freddy, and I'm a fan of his work, and he does a really fantastic job in this movie, even coming back. A much older Robert Englund playing Freddy
Still
in this
plays it.
movie.
Still plays it well. And I
Oh
gotta
yes.
say, although we're gonna touch upon Friday or the Nightmare series at some point, there was
Hmm.
at one point he proposed because he didn't want to keep doing the makeup after this film, but he
Hmm.
proposed doing a series of prequel movies that
Hmm.
explored him as like a killer before he gets killed by the parents.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I thought that would have been interesting because I'll just take more Freddy Krueger. He's just such a great character.
He's my least favorite of the top 3, Michael,
Uh huh.
Jason, Freddy, but definitely
The
in a
performance.
vacuum, the performance, the most compelling villain.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
get the depth and the gore from Jason and Michael, sure, but Freddy definitely plays the mind games well
Mhm.
and better than the other 2, for sure.
The other two don't play mind games. Like
No.
honestly, it's as we touched upon. Michael Myers is basically Jason Voorhees with a William Shatner mask. Jason
Yeah,
Voorhees is just Michael Myers with a hockey mask. Like the two of
yeah.
them are so entwined with each other, like mythologically speaking, for what they can do. Especially once they give up on any pretense of Michael Myers ever being able to be killed.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
very similar in their approaches of just, kill the kids and move on, kill the kids and move on.
yeah, no
Freddy.
connection.
Yeah, Freddy, likes to toy with his victims and make them scared and bring the fear out. So I'll
Hmm.
give Freddy his credit where credit is due. But this movie did show the superiority, in my opinion, that Freddy would get his ass whooped by Jason.
Well, and I
No
think
doubt about it.
that's the weird thing is that they prove that Freddy has the power to control him, and it's the second that Freddy gets pulled out into the real world, which is a contrivance they've done in more than one film, and it just sounds so
Yeah.
dumb each time they do it. That of
Mhm.
course that's when he loses his power because now he's not in your dreams. He's just this doofus that like has a claw hand. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
no, no,
And,
I'm
and,
with
and
you
he
on that.
still has, the brains and the thought process, and
Hmm.
he's still Freddy, but loses that like touch of immortality he has coming at you in your dreams.
Yeah. Now, if I want someone that's comedic and weird and will play games with you, I'm gonna go with Chucky over that because Chucky's at least
Yeah.
fucked up.
Yeah, and
So,
Chucky is an interesting character, and we'll get into that franchise
uh-huh.
at some point as well. That's
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
a good one. But I like Freddy versus Jason. I think it's a good body count movie. It's a fun movie to like throw on like when we're in our late teens, early 20s, like
Hmm.
having a sleepover at a friend's house, watching horror movies, just throw on Freddy versus Jason. Like that's what that movie was to me. I it's special, a place in my heart. But is it a good movie? No.
Well, and like, there's a part of me that is a little sad that we didn't then get the crossover of Freddy versus Jason versus Ash that was proposed at one point, all because
Mhm.
Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell said no, and I really can't blame them for that. They
Yeah,
have
yeah.
tight control of that, and they would have been basically tying their franchise to another franchise, and who knows what the franchise rights would have been. They've struggled to just get what franchise rights they have for the Evil Dead series in their own
Mhm.
hands anyway. Um,
Right.
but there's a part of me that's like, you resurrect Jason and Freddy via the Necronomicon. That's a creative idea. I like that.
That's an interesting thought. Yeah, maybe
Yeah,
we'll get a series or something one day, something a little less
comic books.
productive. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that would be
we had
good. That could
comics.
be fun. That could
Yeah,
be
there was
fun.
there was a comic and there was a sequel comic, Nightmare Warriors, I believe is
Mm,
what it was called. And I didn't actually get the sequel one, but the first book was okay. It was fine. You can see where the creativity of the ideas was, but that's three franchises that you have to balance all the needs for, and that's a bit much.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of creative ideas in that room.
Yeah, there was a lot of creative ideas. That's great. That all leads us, of course, however, to the new Friday the 13th from 2009. New being a relative term when we're talking 14 years ago at this point.
Yeah, we're
Um,
due. We're due for a new one.
we are. I'm gonna say I didn't hate this movie. Like it doesn't tread that far from the basic concept. I think like Freddy or not Freddy. I think Jason wanders around in a burlap sack again for a bit before getting his hockey mask because this was supposed to be a reboot, but is now just considered part of the franchise with some early retelling pieces to it.
Right.
But like the kills are decent. I'm gonna admit there's a shit ton of gratuitous nudity in this film to just keep
Yeah.
you awake. Um, and the production values are good. It was done by like Michael Bay's production company, Platinum Dunes, and if nothing
Mm.
else, it's a very handsome Friday the 13th movie.
Yeah, it really kind of brings it into a modern look,
Uh-huh.
which they kind of thought they were maybe doing with Jason X, and
Yeah.
maybe tried to do with Freddy versus Jason. But you could the production value, like you said, definitely went up. This is a solid movie, good kills. Danielle Panabaker in the movie as like kind of that like new scream queen. She had a few more appearances in other horror movies after that. I was a big fan of her from Sky High, not a horror
Yep.
movie, but I mean could be if you look at it. Um,
It's a
but I mean,
fun movie.
it's a fun movie.
It's a fun movie.
Yeah, and just overall, just a really solid Jason movie, and it
Mhm.
kind of sad this is the last one, but this is where they left it for a while. Like I'm okay with it. This was a good movie for what it was. It grossed some pretty good movie in the box office compared to some of the other ones of recent memory. So the fans kind of liked it. I thought it was a solid movie. I agree.
I mean, you can see why it didn't like maybe warrant an immediate sequel, even if you ignore the licensing issues. It made
Hmm.
90 against a budget of like 15, whereas
Hmm.
Jason versus Freddy managed to clear almost 120 mil
Hmm.
like 6 years earlier. Like from that perspective, you could see Paramount going, "Sure, it didn't cost us that much, and we made our money back." But was this a disappointing return of investment? Should it have done better? Like I don't know. I mean, it certainly outperformed all the previous Friday the 13th that didn't also feature Freddy in them.
Yeah,
Like
there wasn't
so,
like a crossover.
yeah,
I
that wasn't
think
a
that
crossover.
the
Most of them,
power of Freddy versus Jason with the name value of Freddy in the name as well added a couple million to that total, I think for sure. You wanted to
oh yeah,
see that battle. You wanted to see these two titans of horror go at it against each other and see who would come out on top. And interesting enough, three different endings to that movie with, three different victories.
depending upon who won.
Jason versus Freddy.
Yeah,
Yeah, they had one where Freddy won, one where Jason won, which is the one that technically made it, and one where it
right.
was ambiguous, which I
Yeah,
thought pretty neat.
that's neat. Well, I mean, yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, it is interesting to look at it. Like it does out. This new one does outperform everything, including the original movie. Although the original movie made in 1980, its 60 million is a lot more in modern dollars.
Oh, for
Um,
sure, yeah.
yeah, but like it didn't. It certainly outperformed the last three or four that were made by other companies. Because like I think Jason was from 6 through 10, Jason was averaging 15 to 20 million. That was all he was making, and it's not a lot. I mean, it's fine when all your movies cost is $3 million. That's still a nice return on investment. But
Right,
when your
right.
movies start costing like 65 million, or not 65, when your movies start costing 19 million,
Hmm.
not making 92 on it isn't quite as good a return on investment. It's still profitable. Like by
Yes.
Hollywood math, it's still profitable for a slasher film,
Hmm.
but they probably expected more.
I would think so.
Yeah.
The number sounds like kind of laughable when you hear some of the other totals that
No,
movies have
right?
gotten. But
Right?
I think but to your point, it's solid for a slasher movie. I
Mhm.
mean, not every movie is going to have, the box office power of a Scream, that can get people to go in there and see it, or something to that, like. So $90 million, decent, and the best performance by a movie in the franchise, like you said, that didn't have another,
Mhm.
guest villain in the movie like Freddy did.
Yeah.
So I think it's solid.
Yeah. No, and I mean the Scream franchise has been trucking up in how much it costs as well.
Yeah.
But it
You're
makes
gonna
about
having to pay some of those actors a little bit more money as
you
they've
are.
gotten older, and they're
You
like,
are.
"Oh, you want me to come back and do another one? Okay, this one's gonna cost you a little bit more." Like,
Yep.
okay.
But they do get a good return on investment. I mean, the lowest performing was the fourth one, which is the weakest of that franchise, and
Right.
even it made almost 100 million.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I mean, that's what you're looking at. Like, you can see why people are like, man, we got to keep making Scream movies because when you compare it to like the Friday the 13th films, which we were lucky to get 10 million on this one. So no, I don't hate the Friday series, but I've always felt that Friday the 13th was a lesser entry, especially when, like, in my head, he's just doing what Michael Myers does, and we've got Michael Myers. Michael Myers is fantastic, you know?
And Michael does a lot of things really well and better than Jason in some aspects. I think the thing that Jason has over Michael is the violence. Michael does some pretty violent kills, sure.
As the series goes on. Yep.
Yeah, as the series goes on. But Jason, like, I mean, some movies I see, like there was the one with the boyfriend where he stabs him through the back with a machete on the bed, then folds the bed in half and just, folds the kid in half. And then there's the one where the two teenagers are having sex in the tent at the beginning, and Jason just impales her with a road sign and rips her in half. Like, it's
that's final, or the Jason Goes to Hell. That one, I saw that particular scene in stills in a copy of Phantasmagoria that my sister got me. Which she got it for me when I was like 15, and I see this, and it shows all of it in there with the nudity and everything. I'm like, I'm not certain my sister browsed through this magazine before she got this for me, but I'm going to keep reading.
This is holding my attention now.
It got my attention. It was a very iconic sequence right there. That's one of the best kills in that movie, and maybe for the whole franchise.
Yeah, because like it's coming, the death, but I mean, just the way he did it, and just like, I mean, I still just see her just being cut in half with a road sign. I'm like, wow, that's interesting.
And it's an impressive special effect because right up until like they do the cut, like it's one shot from what it looks like, but she gets ripped in half, and you're like, at some point it stops being the actress and it starts being this prosthetic that they just seamed up, and it looks so good.
It's a really good practical effect, which we've had a discussion in some movies how practical effects are obviously better than CGI. CGI has its place, it has its money, and its place in movies and the budget. I get it, but you're never going to top practical effects in a movie, especially ones like that.
That are done well. You get a good artist like Tom Savini or someone in there to do proper special effects. They're going to look better than anything you can crank out in a computer.
Yeah, and some recent movies that have decided to go the CGI route over the practical effects route have suffered for it.
Yep, the Thing.
Yeah, we'll get on that one again in some other. One of my favorite horror movies is The Thing.
So yeah, no, I think it's a solid. I can see why he's rated among the slasher killers. I mean, his franchise went 12 films, and not many slasher franchises go that far. Like. Only Halloween is up there that close. The Nightmares petered out before they got there. Chucky is only managing to slowly crawl his way up to that number, and it's taking a TV series to do it. So, he's definitely one of the reigning kings of killers. But he's no Michael Myers.
No, and like I said, Jason's one of my favorites, definitely, but he's on the Mount Rushmore, if you will, of horror killers, but he is not the killer that Michael is, that's for sure.
He's the guy that tucks in there in the middle between the other faces that you notice more prominently.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I think the real lesson we need to take away from all of this is if you're a teenager, do not go anywhere near a summer camp, okay? Just don't. Is there a summer camp in your town that you can point to and you know where it's at? You need to move. Go somewhere else. Stop being near it, okay?
Yeah. If your parents give you the option of summer camp versus your cousin's house for the summer, go to your cousin's house. Just do yourself a favor.
They could be like, you can go to summer camp or you can go hang out with the math nerds. You're like, I'm going to become a mathlete, okay? I am not getting killed by the hockey mascot.
Yeah, I'm going to pass on that. I don't want to be, murdered by some horrific person because my camp counselors can't stop having sex around the corner. Like, I'm good.
And it's not even when they have sex anymore. They could just be perfectly prim and proper, and Jason's like, well, you're here at Camp Crystal Lake, you must be bad. Dude, have some standards, okay?
His standard is death, and you'll like it.
I suppose so. This has been Not So Live from Asteroid G, where our standard is not death, but we do hope you'll like it. I'm your host, Mike Finkelstein, and with me in the booth was, of course,
Mike, the horror guy.
And we will see you guys next time.